Hello and welcome back to Digital Assets Daily. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in your corner of the world. This morning, the digitization of money and payments had a live stream for the committee hearing, and I'm going to actually just play a few of the highlights right now.
Financial innovation has attempted to fill that need by creating entirely separate payment systems based on their own digital currency and distributed ledger technology. Cryptocurrencies have long claimed the ability to provide faster, less expensive payments on a global scale with some degree of anonymity. More recently, a new type of cryptocurrency has emerged aimed at achieving these benefits while marginalizing the volatility of some of its predecessors. Stablecoins, which may be issued by a central entity, deliver price stability by having their value pegged to another asset, like commercial bank deposits or government-issued bonds. Still, there are legitimate questions about certain stablecoins and digital currencies more broadly, such as the degree of oversight, impact on the transmission of monetary policy, and disruption of banks' traditional financial intermediation. The Financial Stability Board recently reported that stablecoins could pose financial stability risks if offered and used by a large existing customer base. Nothing amplified these concerns more than Facebook's announcement of the Libra project last year. To be sure, the cryptocurrency ecosystem is as diverse in its products and functions as the rest of financial services. And as I said in our last digital currency hearing, it seems to me that these and other similar innovations are inevitable, beneficial, and the U.S. should be the lead in their development.
I worry that the dollar may end up being like the very best flip phone in 2006, or the very best movie rental store in 2005, or the very best horse-drawn carriage in the 19-teens. So, Mr. Giancarlo, I want to offer you just a chance to give one example here. If we already had a digital dollar, how differently would things look earlier this year when the Treasury took several weeks to send out millions of dollars of individual relief payments under the CARES Act, including over 80 million via an old-fashioned paper check?
Thank you. Well, it would have been able to be instantaneous delivery of those funds to those with smartphones. Now, as Professor Coutinho and others have noted, we don't have universal distribution of smartphones, but we have actually fairly good penetration of smartphones into certain communities. That is an issue that is in itself is worthy of further analysis, but at least the technology would be there for instantaneous distribution of funds in a crisis.
Yeah.
We have many communities that rely on paper checks. Military families, for example, for their salary, and veterans for their benefits are also wait sometimes weeks for receipt of that, or they have difficulty in getting that money to their family members. This would allow for immediate distribution of those as well.
None of you are opposed to a digital currency for the U.S. dollar. Is my assumption correct?
Yes, Senator.
That's correct.
To take on those pilot projects, do they have the necessary resources and staffing with the sophistication level to be able to move forward in a manner that really complies with what you're trying to achieve here, which I don't disagree with?
Thank you. So I'll start with my own experience running a federal agency. I know that when we attempted to do larger technological initiatives, we needed to bring in expertise from the private sector. We simply didn't have the salary scale to bring in that level of expertise. We didn't have the teams. We had busy day jobs to do our mission that Congress assigned to us and to move in the area. We started at the CFTC trying to do some work in artificial intelligence to better understand the market data we were receiving. And yet it was very difficult to do with our existing resources. So the answer to your question is, I really believe the right way to do this is the way we did it in the space program, the way we did it in the early days of the internet. And that is the core policy is driven by the official sector, would be driven by the Federal Reserve. But we would bring in the innovativeness of the private sector, the project management skills of the private sector, and the sense of urgency of the private sector to drive this forward. So I believe it should be, in the best American tradition, a public-private partnership with all the core policy issues settled by the official sector, but with a lot of the human power and the intellectual inventiveness of the private sector brought to bear.
Thank you, and I appreciate that.
Can you tell me, once again, the steps that the United States Congress needs to take to have a digital currency in the US dollar within the next 3 years?
Thank you, Senator. By the way, it's nice to see you again. I was before your committee, one of the last testimonies I gave before leaving the CFTC. Nice to see you again. Thank you very much. So to answer your question, I would recommend that Congress encourage, if not authorize, the Federal Reserve and Treasury to work together on a series of pilot programs in the same way we used pilot programs to land a man on the moon, to explore different elements of this, and that Congress make very explicit in its instructions what areas of concern should be focused on. Issues of privacy, which we just discussed, issues of financial inclusion to be built in right from the outset, issue of cyber resilience, critically important, issues of interoperability with other CBDCs being developed in the world are just some of the areas that Congress, I think, could instruct the Federal Reserve and Treasury to take into account as they roll out a series of pilot programs, which could be done nationally, can be done locally. They could focus on discrete sectors. One area to experiment with might be veterans benefit distribution or military pay for military families. Those are areas that we could do in, say, a Fed regional area where there may be a military base, or perhaps benefits on rural areas and say Indian reservations. We could look at those in discrete areas, do a discrete pilot program, see what we've learned from it. Just as the early space missions were relatively modest. They just tried to launch a satellite into orbit before they went further to land on the moon. I think we should start small, learn what we learn, then take the next step. Drop back, analyze what we've learned, go to the next step. And each of those steps should be reported to Congress with Congress's involvement, because at the end of the day, Congress needs to make sure that public policy is built into this new future of money that our children and our grandchildren are going to be using long after we're gone.
All right, I think that's a great handful of videos that I believe highlight the better part of this morning's live stream. Who is J. Christopher Giancarlo? Giancarlo was born May 12, 1959. He's an American attorney and former business executive who served as the 13th chairman of the United States Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC. Giancarlo was sworn in as CFTC Commissioner on June 16, 2014, for a term expiring April 13, 2019. Starting on January 20, 2017, with the President Donald Trump's inauguration, Giancarlo began serving as acting chair of the CFTC. In March 2017, the president nominated Giancarlo to be full-time chair of the commission, and Giancarlo was confirmed as chairman of the commission by the United States Senate on August 3rd, 2017. Another thing I want to highlight here is when Chris Giancarlo was the chairman of the Commodities Future Trading Commission, he became a rock star of sorts in certain corners of the cryptocurrency community, helping establish criteria that eventually led to Bitcoin and Ethereum being declared commodities, more like coffee or sugar than stock in a company. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission largely followed suit and eventually also declaring that Bitcoin and Ether, the cryptocurrency powering the Ethereum blockchain, weren't securities. Now Chairman Emeritus Giancarlo, who was deemed crypto dad following an impassioned speech he gave to Congress where he credited Bitcoin for finally getting his kids interested in finance, is at it again, having co-written a detailed argument published this morning in the International Financial Law Review for why XRP, the cryptocurrency formerly known as Ripples, was also not a security. The only problem is he's no longer a regulator. In fact, his employer is on the payroll of Ripple, the largest single owner of XRP, whose co-founders actually created the cryptocurrency. So you can see that Ripple has a lot to benefit and gain from this discussion on digitization of money and payments, especially having Chris Giancarlo in on the discussion. So it's very exciting if you are an investor in XRP. All right, guys, remember this is not financial advice. It is for entertainment purposes only. I'll leave you with a final thought. I can and I will. All right, guys, we will catch you in the next one.